What's the most obscene display of private wealth you've ever witnessed? I work in a shoe store. I once had a customer walk in and say give me one pair of every men's shoe in a size 10. Didn't want to try them on or look at them. He just needed some shoes for each of his houses. I work on commission so it was a huge sale for me. But holy duck. That was about 140 pairs of shoes. My boss once had me drive him to an exotic car dealership to pick up his new Bentley, 3 days after my paycheck had bounced. David Tepper, billionaire hedge fund manager that moved out of New Jersey. Doing this caused New Jersey to have really their entire state budget. One of my students gets dropped off to school in a helicopter. A guy who moved 300 miles away just so he could buy a plane to fly to work every day. I had an obscenely wealthy kid in my graduating class. His parents bought him a brand new Range Rover on his 16th birthday and he crashed it into a school bus. They got him a new one and he crashed it road racing. They got him a new one and he got a DUI and finally the police took away his license. Thank the Lord. I met the CEO of the company I work for and I complimented his watch. The first thing he did is take it off and they let me wear it. Come to find out after doing a little research, the watch he was wearing is a Patek Philippe that cost 1.75 million. That watch alone cost more than every asset in my family for the past 4 generations. A party at the CEO's house for Halloween. Insanity. I thought I was going to get kicked out of the neighborhood because I was only driving a 30k car, not a 300k car. Anything you can think of. He had at this party. Staff with signature cocktails at the door. A fully staffed bar for liquor. A fully staffed bar for wine. An entire table made of ice with ice shot glasses and 10 different vodkas. He was wearing a costume made of leather that his wife commissioned for him. Handmade in France. The 400-yard bridge to his private lake was strung up with extra lights. And the dock had a separate bar for those who wanted to sit on the lake. I was driving for Uber in a college town and picked up a group from one of the richer frat houses to take them to a club. The girls were discussing how one of their friends was upset and went on a huge shoe shopping spree where each pair cost roughly $2,000 except for one. This one pair costed $7,000. One of the girls casually expresses that $7,000 is really not a bad price to pay for shoes. They should have just been a little bit prettier. I would have paid $5,000 for them. Why they called a Uber instead of a limo, I don't know. I was helping an owner rent his apartment, which is an investment property. It's a 2,500 square feet condo with 4 balconies and 360-degree views of Midtown Eastern Manhattan, asking for $15,000 a month. Rented it for 6 months upfront with option to renew to someone who has ties to oil families in the Middle East. The person never moved in. Lived in the international dorms in college. First week of school move-in happens and you get to meet a bunch of people. One of the people I met was this girl from Singapore. She's pretty cool and whatnot, but after a few weeks she realizes that to get around she needs a car, as public transport blows. So, naturally, she calls her parents to tell them that she needs a car. No biggie. She tells them that she needs a Mercedes S-Class. Okay, nice. But remember, she's from Singapore. If you know anything about Singapore, it's that cars cost anywhere from 6-9x what they do in the US. Casually, her parents wire her enough money to get an S-Class. In Singapore, girl gets $650,000 wired to her account. Not knowing that it costs 6x less here, she goes to the dealership then comes back in an hour with no car. I asked her what happened, and she says, oh, it's getting delivered. Sure enough, 2 days later a brand new car shows up, except it's no S-Class. It's a Lamborghini Murcielago. Touché. Well played. I later find out she doesn't know how to drive, so she hired a chauffeur to drive her around. She would sit in the passenger side of her own Lambo and be driven places. What made it more hilarious was that the chauffeur would actually wear a black jacket and hat. Eventually she got her driver's license and was able to drive the car herself. I think the chauffeur was around for 2-3 months though. After moving out of that dorm, I didn't really keep contact with her, but I assume she went back home just like every other Berlin international student. My husband wrote a movie, long story, with a friend of his who is a full-time writer in Hollywood. Friend went to the house of a famous producer to pitch their script. He called my husband and said, "They have a Picasso." Husband is like, "Bro, very cool." Friend says, "The Picasso is in their parking garage." Eater, yes. A movie is a long story, and don't call me Shirley. Eater 2. I am in the US. Had no idea there is a small crappy car called a Picasso, but till. I went to a birthday party in 3rd grade. Every girl in the 3rd grade was invited. So 80 girls were picked up in limos, taken to build a bear where we could choose any bear. Then we all got manicures and pedicures. We went to Red Robin for dinner, and limoed back to her mansion for a sleepover. I will never attend a party that fancy ever again. Guy from my town bought a helicopter. He had fallen out with his neighbor, so decided to call his pilot at 4 AM and hover over his neighbor's house all night to annoy him. My last job before college was dealing with what they call the 1% now. We had a call from a customer who had spent a 5-figure sum for items for her house, and realized the house she had it sent to was not the house she wanted to decorate with them. After being informed the order was already in transit, she just reordered everything and had it rushed delivered to the house she wanted it for. She was totally cool with it. I always picture the basement of her one house having the duplicates sitting there, worth far more than what I made at that job in a year. Went to college on an athletic scholarship at an expensive private Catholic university. I went to school on the GI Bill or I would have never been able to afford it. I was on the lacrosse team, and during a party at the on-campus apps one of the captains starting stabbing his refrigerator with a K-bar. I was outside smoking a cig and I asked him why he did that, knowing full well he would have to replace it. His exact words were, "I'm not paying for it. My dad is a baller at Bank of America. He and I did not get along." Edit. Grammar. They had a black swan and an albino peacock. Saw a news article that an extremely wealthy Chinese man's son bought 8 iPhone 7s for his dog. I mean, some comments here are obscene, but this is just pointless. I went to Chipotle with a friend and they willingly paid for us both to get guacamole. A friend of mine's stepdad hired Smash Mouth to play at his Labor Day party for around 200 people. One of my dad's friends from high school is unbelievably rich and a collector. He owns a legitimate Stradivarius. Eventually, he decided he wanted to learn how to actually play it. So he signed up for lessons and brought a ducking Stradivarius with him down to the local music shop to meet his instructor and have his first lesson. I can only imagine the look on his instructor's face. In summer of 1988 I was 16 and I went on a family trip to visit relatives in Cali, Colombia. One night, they took us on a drive around town to see the city at night. On the tour, we passed a 6 or 7-story office tower under construction in a residential neighborhood that my cousin told me was to be the future home of one of the city's largest narco-traficantes, or drug kingpins. While the house was under construction, he'd had another large mansion built directly across the street so he could keep an eye on the building's progress from his home. Essentially, he built a mansion to live in while he watched his bigger mansion being built. I had a friend whose sibling married someone in the British aristocracy. I was at their house and needed to pee, so my friend indicated towards the correct door. I went into the bathroom, and I swear to God, I got lost trying to find the toilet. But it was okay, because there were a lot of old Dutch Masters oil still lifes to look at in there. In high school, my friend's parents paid me $50 to hang out with their dogs in the basements for 2 hours while they had a party on the main floor. I got to hang out with dogs, play video games, and they brought me down some of the catered food. I would have done it for free. Playing the grand piano for a cocktail party at this estate home on a private 63-acre island in Darien, Connecticut. It's now for sale at $175 million. When I was living in Southern California, my buddy's dad was a therapist specializing in addiction. Needless to say, he made an absolute killing. He was a wealthy person that hated wealthy people, as in snobs, the country club types, people that own yachts to participate in a pissing contest, etc. He paid to have a statue of a chicken made and put it directly in his front yard. This thing was not only fully painted and somewhere between 15 and 25 feet tall, it crowed loudly every day at sunrise. When I asked him why he had it, he simply said because my neighbors are yuppie d-heads. Someone spending a cute 15k on Cavern Fortum and Masons. Me behind them, standing there with my cute chocolate bar. My co-worker comes from a lot of money. I have $200 to my name and I listen to the kid complain about how poor he is, that he only has $37k in the bank. This guy got stopped by a skin lotion vendor in the mall, and in order to make him go away, he bought $3,500 worth of skin product from this vendor and just put it on his dad's card. Guy, you suck. Quirky 1. I have a regular day job, but I also teach English as a second language to Gulf nationals, in particular Saudi families. I receive a lot of gifts, but one boy I tutored came from a family who owned some of the most expensive racing camels in the Gulf. The father buys and sells these animals that are over 6 figures. When the son graduated, the father allowed me to choose a camel that would be mine, and designated as not for sale. I have a racing camel in Saudi Arabia that lives probably in better conditions than I do. Met a girl who worked on a yacht and it was located in Monaco. I was able to board it for about an hour and get a tour. The owner was some Russian oligarch or something and the boat was worth $100 million. I wasn't allowed to walk around it freely, but the thing was tricked out in a way I never thought possible. It wasn't even the biggest yacht in port either. I work in the parts department at a luxury car dealership. We basically have two kinds of customers. People who ask for a quote on touch-up paint, $55.00 after tax, and then say why is it so expensive? People who want to just straight up order carbon fiber exhaust tips, $6,500.00 after tax. Not that they even ask the price, and just ask if they should pay then or when they pick them up. The parents of this girl that went to my HS got her some average, probably $10k car for her 16th birthday. She gets all upset because it isn't what she wanted. Her parents then go, "Just kidding. This is the actual car we got you," and give her some $70k Range Rover. She got to keep them both. I've been to Monaco. The harbor full of private yachts was awe-inspiring. During college I worked at a place selling very high-end patio furniture in the richest DC suburb. One day a Washington Redskin comes in and buys a custom patio furniture set for his deck and pool area. Total cost for 10 pieces was over $24,000. He paid cash and I set up delivery for 6 weeks later because the furniture had to be made at the manufacturer. 3 weeks later he was cut by the team. I called when the order came in and he said, "Oh, I'm in the Caribbean now. Think I'm selling that house 3. Think I'm going to retire. You like the furniture?" Me, "Yeah." Him, "You can have it. Thanks for being a fan." 14 years later and I still have that furniture and the fanciest patio set up in my middle class neighborhood. I had a roommate in the dorms who grabbed a roll of paper towels and used the whole thing still rolled up to sop up a spilt beer. That still pisses me off. Private banker for a wealth management firm checking in. So as you'd imagine I've seen quite a bit, and have a few tales I could tell. Most memorable was a foreign national who was purchasing a private jet in America. He was insanely reckless with his spending. But I'm going to be honest, this guy was so sickeningly wealthy he probably couldn't spend all his money if he tried. And boy did he try, past tense as he's a former client. He saw that a Saudi prince had installed an all-gold bathroom on his private A380. For those of you who don't know, that's the largest commercial passenger airplane in operation. This guy wanted to imitate that on his more modest, $34 million jet. Only problem is he wanted the bathroom installed in a 2-week time frame as he was entertaining his father on board the plane. The company doing it failed to source all the gold required in time and the sink would be left plain. Rather than take his father in an unfinished bathroom, he sourced another jet that already had this feature. God knows how he found it, and spent another $40 million to buy this new jet in time to impress his old man. 2 jets in the space of a month. Standard disclaimer. This wasn't my client directly but the firm's biggest client at the time. My ex's dad's semi-daily driver was an Aston Martin Vanquish. They lived in a multi-million-dollar home. rented entire homes, condos all around the world for multiple family vacations each year. And my ex's private high school tuition cost double what my college tuition cost. His parents paid out of pocket for he and his 2 siblings to go to very expensive colleges. He had multiple trust funds and investments. And they were perfectly wonderful people. All of them. Very family oriented. Very kind. As generous as they were wealthy. They endowed scholarships. Worked hard. Gave great advice. Gave to charity. And were always attempting to learn and observe the world around them and changing their views accordingly. Great family. Saddest part of the breakup for me was breaking up with the rest of the family tbh. Grew up in a major oil town, so there was never a shortage of ostentatious new money around once the last boom started. Honestly, I've seen so much dumb it that it's hard to narrow it down. But I suppose a good enough example would be the time I witnessed a friend's dad bet $75,000 that the next card laid down would be a 6 or lower while playing poker with a group of his buddies. He lost, but fortunately he kept like $100,000 in the center console of his truck, so he was able to pay in cash on the spot. I've also seen more $10,000 plus holes of golf than I could possibly count. Side note, their family is broke as duck now because the industry crashed. And he got caught up in some kind of scam real estate development deal. Not a rarity. Most of his kind are significantly worse off now than they were before the boom. Edit. I'm not telling you people where I grew up. I'm one of like 100 people to have ever lived there. My wife used a nanny for a very wealthy family. They wanted a fun off-roading vehicle, so they bought a tricked out Jeep that was $60,000. The guy gets hit in an intersection and they would be without the Jeep for 2 weeks. So he buys an Escalade instead of renting a vehicle. Mind you, this Jeep was his 3rd vehicle that he hardly ever drove. Not very obscene compared to some of the examples, but it stuck with me. I dated a girl who went to a private school when I was a senior in high school. I remember driving through the student parking lot and you could see the economic hierarchy. All the way to left parked the BMWs and Mercedes, and as you moved down you'd start seeing newer Subarus and Hondas. Then as you got down to the end you'd see the kids' cars whose parents were teachers or kids who were there on scholarships with cars like crappy Civics and beat up hand-me-down minivans and SUVs. I'll be the first to admit that I had it really good when it comes to being born into a reasonably wealthy family. But I just can't imagine getting handed the keys to a brand new Beamer at 16.